Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I know it's election day and everyone's freaking out about it, so I thought it would be a good idea to focus on some fake politics. That being A Song of Ice and Fire. So today we're going to be talking about Book 3, which is A Storm of Swords. If you want to see my reviews for the first two books, the playlist is at the top of the screen. And spoilers everyone, so if you want to buy it, use the link in my description. This is my favorite novel of the series because it has countless plot twists, and every chapter leaves me on the edge of my seat. And the characters change so much from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. I feel like there's a lot of ground to cover, so tighten your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy night. Like the first two reviews, I'll be reviewing this book going by character to character. So starting off with my least favorite character, Bland Stark, full name Blandon Stark. So yeah, Bland is still pretty boring. I like the plotline he's involved in, but he's just a boring character to follow. I'd rather see his chapters from Mira's point of view, or maybe even Jojen, or even Hodel, for that matter. I liked the part when Bran turned into Hodel, though. That was pretty cool. And Bran's last chapter, he meets Sam, which is my other least favorite character. So this means that the two characters I hate the most are interacting. Fun. So Sam has to swear to Bran never to tell anyone that Bran is still alive. Speaking of Sam and characters I don't like, we might as well talk about my thoughts on Sam Tarly. So basically, Sam's too much of a whiny little bitch. At least he gets to kill one of the others. So basically, while Jon is dealing with the wildlings, Samwell and his group of the Night's Watch are focused on the others. And he and the other Night's Watchmen have to fight a big army of whites. The whites are composed of both the wildlings and dead members of the Night's Watch. And I just gotta say, Samwell is the most annoying character I've seen. All he does is bitch about how weak he is and how much his father hates him. And I'm sick of the bitching. I'm sick of Sam's bitching for 5 chapters. I hate it. Fuck Sam. So moving on to characters I actually like, let's start with Davos. Now, Davos is held prisoner in Dragonstone and is visited by Melisandre. Melisandre tells Davos that only 2 of the 3 false kings have died so far. This is foreshadowing for Joffrey dying only a few chapters later. Stannis makes Davos the Lord of the Rainwood and Hand of the King. So Stannis and Davos leave Dragonstone, leaving only a token force to guard the island. And Stannis still has not conceded the defeat, so he's still in the game. The Game of Thrones. Stannis and Davos have been summoned to the Night's Watch, where they meet Jon and Sam and discuss strategies on how to battle the others. Because Melisandre's prophecy has stuff to do with the others, so that's why Stannis believes in them and why he thinks that they need to help fight them. Moving on to Jon Snow. So he's been infiltrating the wildlings and he's pretending to be a Turncloak. So him and Ygritte fall in love and she really challenges him to open up and come out of his shell. When Jon thinks that Bran is dead, he wonders if he lives on through summer, which is what I think would happen to Jon after he's killed at the end of A Dance with Dragons. When Ygritte finds out that Jon is a mole, she gets angry and hits him with an arrow. And Ygritte is later killed by someone with an arrow, which is very sad for Jon. Jon is arrested as a traitor because the Night's Watch think he's a Turncloak and an oath breaker. So Jon is released and given one last chance to prove his innocence and is sent to kill Mance Rayder, the head of the Night's Watch. Slint still considers Jon a traitor because he didn't kill Mance as he was sent to do, and Mance is instead imprisoned in Castle Black. So the wildlings have come south not to conquer, but to escape the others, we find that out. Without the wall, Mance's people would find no safe haven, even in the south. The wildlings have come under attack from the east by the Rangers, and we find out that the Starks aren't the only Turncloaks. There's a wildling named Varamir, who could also turn into a wolf. So Stannis, towards the end of the book, he enters Castle Black, like I said, and Melisandre meets Jon. So Stannis doesn't believe that Jon is a traitor because he knew Jaina Slint as well as Ned Stark. Because Jon is Ned's son, Stannis trusts him. Stannis points out that Castle Black is easy to attack from the south. This is because Castle Black was built not with a wall on the south side, so they can't fight back against the other realms. Stannis offers to legitimize Jon and name him the Lord of Winterfell. Stannis also offers to let the wildlings through the wall and settle them in the gift, given that they accept the Lord of Light as their god. And Stannis wants to marry Jon to Val and solidify his peace with the wildlings. But Jon would have to adopt Stannis' faith and religion and burn the godswood of Winterfell, which is of course where the Starks pray. And Jon asks for some time to consider the offer, and he later declines because he's appointed to be the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. So moving on to Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys uses her dragons to kill the slave owners, and she frees the Unsullied, and she gives the Unsullied a choice on whether or not to join her, and because of that, because of the choice she gives them, they love and idolize her, and every single one of them stays. So she conquers Meereen peacefully, and meanwhile, Jorah Mormont, the creepy pedophile that he is, keeps hitting on Daenerys, and it makes her uncomfortable. But later she stands up to him and commands him to back off and stop simping for her. But also, Barristan comes from King's Landing, and he wants to support Daenerys. When Jorah Mormont objects to this because Barristan previously swore loyalty to Robert, Barristan reveals that Jorah has spied on her this entire time on behalf of Varys and the Small Council in hopes of getting a royal pardon, which explains how we find out that Robert Baratheon found out that Daenerys was pregnant in Book 1. So Dany gets all mad and she sends both of them away. And meanwhile, King Cleon now rules Astapor and pretends to do it in Dany's name, even though she doesn't support that. And he now has slaves and is raising them as Unsullied. Cleon used to work for Dany, but he later betrayed her, so he's using her name to get people to like him. So later, Jorah and Barristan return to Daenerys. Barristan tells her that her father and Viserys were both mad and that Rhaegar wasn't. Using this quote I like, the Targaryens have always danced too close to madness. King Jaehaerys once told me that madness and greatness are two sides of the same coin. Every time a Targaryen is born, the gods toss a coin in the air, and the world holds its breath to see how it will land. So Dany sends Jorah away again and threatens to kill him if she sees him again. But she allows Barristan to stay with her, and he becomes her knight. So Dany decides to stay in Meereen and rule as queen because she needs to fix the city and needs more experience before she takes over Westeros. So I love Daenerys' arc in this. She remains peaceful and diplomatic throughout, even granting Jorah mercy after he betrays her. She decides that she has to put conquering Westeros on hold because he has to fix things in Meereen, and for that reason I think she won't turn mad, unlike the TV show, because she's too pure-hearted and she cares too much about the little people. So moving on to Catelyn Stark, I think Catelyn Stark was right when she said that the wolves were sent to protect the Stark children. Robb should have listened to Greywind when he howled at the Freys, and he should have listened to his muzzle. Robb believes that he's invincible because he wins every battle, but he loses many alliances in the process. Catelyn saying how she was disappointed at first being married to Eddard instead of Brandon is similar to Sansa being disappointed with Willis instead of Lois. So Robb suggests that Jon be legitimized so that if Robb dies, Jon could have the North. But Catelyn does not want Jon to be heir because she's worried that Jon's children will betray Robb's children. But I think that's just an excuse because she hates Jon because he's a bastard. We went through this. I don't know. Catelyn, I like Catelyn, but when it comes to Jon, she's a stone cold bitch, which is why she becomes Lady Stoneheart, I guess. Something that's different about the books to the show is that Rob leaves his wife at River Run, which means he isn't at the Red Wedding. So Catelyn is worried about her grief consuming her, foreshadowing exactly what happens when she becomes Lady Stoneheart. Um, so yeah, the chapter where they die, the Red Wedding, is extremely sad. Um, but it's also probably one of the best written chapters in this entire series. Definitely the best written chapter in this book. So after Catelyn and Robb are killed, Lord Westerling and Jane are giving a royal pardon for some reason, and they now serve the Lannisters, but Jane's still loyal to Robb, so it's really sad about Catelyn and Robb dying. Well, Catelyn dying, air quotes. We'll talk about that later when we get to the epilogue. Moving on to Arya Stark. Arya starts out by traveling with Gendry as well as Harwin, who tries to take her to her mother. But during her travels, she meets this man named Thoros and finds out that he was brought back to life 6 times. And him being brought back to life foreshadows Catelyn Stark later in the book, as well as possibly Jon Snow in The Winds of Winter whenever that comes out. Probably will never do, but anyway. Gendry stops traveling with Arya after he's knighted by Lord Beric, and Arya gets abducted by the Hound after Beric refuses to kill him. The Hound tries to take Arya and hold her for ransom so he can sell her back to Robb. The Hound, we find out that the Hound hates his brother because his brother was the one who burned his face off, and that's why he's afraid of fire. So later, the Tickler kills the Hound because he refuses to go back to King's Landing. And the Hound dies because he drank too much wine. The, the wounds got to him quickly, and he lost the fight. And Arya kills the Tickler. Arya refuses to give the Hound a mercy killing and leaves him to die. So she boards a ship to Bravos and gives the captain the coins he received from Jaqen Hagar in Book 2 that says Vala Morghulis on it, and he gives her both a cabin and a passage, which leaves me with the question, who is that captain, and how does he know the Faceless Man in Jaqen Hagar? So moving on to Jaime Lannister, first off I gotta say that in the audiobook, Roy DeTreese does a good job of giving Tyrion and Jaime similar accents, and it makes a lot of sense because they're brothers. So Jaime is escorted by Brienne as a prisoner by Catelyn to ransom for Arya and Sansa. Jaime losing his hand was a symbol of losing his past self and a start to his character development. So Jaime is now crippled, not having a hand, similar to how he crippled Bran, who can't use his legs. So I guess he weeps what he sows. So everyone calls Jaime Kingslayer, but nobody calls Bobby B Oathbreaker, which is something that Jaime points out in this book. By what right does the wolf judge the lion? He says to Brienne, as he judges him for breaking his oath. Jaime doesn't feel anything about Joffrey's death. Because he wasn't really a big part of his son's life, he doesn't really feel anything. When Jaime and Brienne return to King's Landing, Brienne is arrested for the murder of Renly, but Jaime thinks that Brienne is innocent of killing Renly, and tells Loras to judge Brienne fairly. I like the relationship between Jaime and Brienne. First, they kind of start off hating each other, but he grows to respect her, and that's when he later saves her from that bear. So anyway, Jaime later has Brienne and Loras brought back before him, and Loras says he trusts Brienne now. So in the show, after Jaime returns to King's Landing, Jaime rapes Cersei over Joffrey's dead body, but in the books it's consensual, and I like that better because it makes Jaime more likable in the books. Even though it's still incest, at least it's not rape. You know, I'll take what I could get with these books. So Tywin tries to marry Cersei off to Oberyn and Jaime off to Margaery, but Jaime gets mad at this, saying that he only wants to be Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. And Tywin takes this to heart, and he disowns him and says, "You're no son of mine," like that Genesis song. So Jaime's now on the small council, and he finds out that 1. The Lannisters are granting Riverrun to the Freys. 2. The Lannisters are legitimizing Ramsay Snow and name Roose Bolton the Lord of the North. Bad idea. And 3. Tywin orders the mountain to be healed so that the king's justice could execute him. so they could please House Martell because they're furious that Oberyn died. So Jaime meets a girl who claims to be Arya Stark, but she's actually Jane Poole, and she's sent away to be married after Ramsay, and we all know how that's gonna happen. We all know how that's gonna go wrong. Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Jane Poole. But anyway, Cersei is angry that Jaime pushed Bran out of the tower, and Jaime thinks that she sent the assassin after Bran, but she denies it. And Jaime realizes that it's Joffrey, because Joffrey's an asshole, and I guess he wanted to appease his father. Cersei doesn't believe this, and Jaime doesn't believe that she thinks Tyrion killed Joffrey, so they get into a huge fight, and he sends her away. Which is kind of the beginning of their growing rivalry between each other, which will persist throughout Book 4 and Book 5. Cersei is such a bitch, mainly because her father keeps making her get married to men she doesn't love, and he doesn't treat her the same way he treats her brothers. And Tyrion's also forced to be engaged to Sansa. So Tyrion basically pimps out his kids to all these other lords. He's a bad dad. So at the end of the book, Jaime sends Brienne to find Sansa and the real Arya and protect them, which leads us in the whole arc in Book 5. I like this quote he says to her at the end. He says, "A sword so fine must bear a name. It would please me if you would call this one Oathkeeper. You'll be defending Ned Stark's daughter with Ned Stark's own steel. Sansa Stark is my last chance for honor." And I think that quote signifies how far Jaime has become since the beginning of the book. We find out that he's not that bad of a guy, and I mean he was a bad guy, but now he's trying to change and be better, and he's helping out Sansa Stark. So moving on to Tyrion Lannister, who I think is the most interesting character in this book. He starts off being engaged to be married to Sansa, but he's so respectful that he doesn't consummate the marriage since Sansa doesn't want him to. So, he's a good guy, thinks about her feelings. Joffrey tells Tyrion that he wants to send Rob's head to Sansa and make her cry. But Tywin, Joffrey's grandpa, tells Joffrey to go to his room because he's acting like a little bitch. So we find out that Tyrion had nothing to do with the Red Wedding. It was mostly just his father and his sister. He tries to comfort Sansa, but he knows that he can't because he's a Lannister and he pretty much hates all the Lannisters. Tyrion tries to marry Seoff to Sir Talad so Sir Dizzy doesn't find out that she's his whore. And he gives Joffrey a book about kings right before his wedding. Joffrey cuts the book in half, which is foreshadowing to me because it means that he won't be a king for that long. Tyrion explains that one of his king's uncles killed him, foreshadows how Cersei blames Tyrion for killing Joffrey. Something I noticed about Joffrey's wedding is that there's so much food at it, and Tyrion remarks that there's so many starving civilians in King's Landing, but there's so much food here that not a lot of food that nobody's going to eat. So it just kind of shows the huge class difference between the wealthy and the poor in King's Landing, kind of like Parasite. So Joffrey bullying Tyrion by making two dwarves fight each other and then pouring wine on Tyrion's head just makes it so much more satisfying when Joffrey dies. So Tyrion is accused of killing Joffrey and he wants trial by combat. Bronn refuses to fight the Mountain for Tyrion because he wouldn't get paid enough money for its worth and he thinks he's going to lose. Kevin is loyal to his brother Tywin because it's Tywin who made the Lannisters' enemies pay for their abuse of their father, Tytos Lannister, who was a peaceful but weak man, so Kevin's not doing it, even though Kevin believes Tyrion. The Lannisters have the Tyrells on their side, but the Tyrells hate the Martells since Oberyn killed one of the Martells in a duel years ago. But Oberyn Martell wants to fight on behalf of Tyrion because he wants to kill the Mountain, because the Mountain killed Oberyn's sister. A lot to explain. So Shae betrays Tyrion and tells the court that he and Sansa teamed up to kill Joffrey. And Tyrion makes a big speech, yada yada yada. "I did not kill Joffrey, but I wish that I had. I wish I could kill you all." Great speech. Peter Dinklage killed that line in the series. So Oberyn loses to the Mountain by letting his emotion and arrogance get in the way. "You raped her, you murdered her, you killed her children." That's what Oberyn says like 50 times. So we find out that the Mountain raped Elia Martell, not because Tywin told him to, but because the Mountain's just an asshole. He's the only character in this book who has no reason to be an asshole. He's just a terrible person. At least Joffrey, you could blame it on his bad parents. Or Ramsay, you could blame it on his bad parents. Solzy. But the Mountain, he's just a bad person. So because Oberyn loses to the Mountain, that means that Tyrion is sentenced to death. But at least this means that the Mountain is also dead. So, the night before Tyrion's about to be killed, Jaime frees Tyrion, but not before telling him that he lied about Tysa. That Tysa was not a whore, but a crofter's daughter, just to see appealed. Lord Tywin has forced Jaime all those years ago to lie about Tysa, so to teach Tyrion a lesson for trusting a low-born woman who he thought married Tyrion for the money. Tyrion's mad at him and tells him that Tyrion killed Joffrey, even though he didn't. He was just trying to get on Jaime's bad side. So Varys helps Tyrion escape, but before they leave, Tyrion goes upstairs and strangles Save for betraying him, and Tyrion also kills Tywin with a crossbow while Tywin's taking a shit. Not before telling Tyrion he has no idea where Tysa is. And the line at the end is the most memorable line of Lord Tywin Lannister did not, in the end, sit cold. So moving on to Sansa Stark. Sansa's engaged to marry Rhaelys Tyrell, and Sansa simping for Rhaelys, even though she doesn't know him, shows how she learned absolutely nothing from simping for Joffrey in Book 1. She meets Marjorie, Rhaelys' sister, and Savage's grandmother, Olenna, and Marjorie is engaged to Joffrey, so Olenna asks Sansa what she thinks of Joffrey. And Olenna does the smart thing where she tells the singer to sing louder, so Sansa could tell her that Joffrey is a monster, kind of secretively, so nobody else could hear. Also, we find out that it was Garland Tyrell who wore Renly's armor, and everybody thought it was Renly's ghost. So, like I said, Sansa's engagement with Rhaelys doesn't work out so well, and she's forced to marry Tyrion. Sansa's pretty shallow, if you ask me. She's complaining about Tyrion's ugliness, but it's better than Joffrey, you know? Like, she was engaged to marry Joffrey. I think Tyrion's a big step up from that. So, after Joffrey's death, Sansa escapes with the help of Sir Dantas because he's sure to be a suspect. But Sir Dantas betrays Sansa for gold, but Littlefinger kills him and takes Sansa to the Eyrie. Littlefinger tells her that it was Olenna Tyrell who killed Joffrey when she took one of the amethysts from Sansa's hairnet. And Littlefinger arranged the plans when he met Olenna when he joined the Lannisters. And he also reveals that he sent the dwarves to the wedding so it would distract Joffrey from Olenna poisoning him. Littlefinger's an evil genius. So Sansa and Littlefinger are going to live in the Eyrie with Lady Lysa Arryn, Catelyn's sister, who's kind of crazy. You know, the one who feeds your 12-year-old son with the breast milk. So Sansa has to change her name to Elaine, so nobody will know who she is. And something else I noticed is that Sansa disrespected Jon for being a bastard back in Book 1, but now she has to pretend to be Peter's bastard in Book 3. So it's ironic. I guess you reap what you sow, Sansa. So Lysa doesn't want Sansa around, but she wants to marry her off to her son Robert. So yay, more incest. Littlefinger also mentions that Marjorie is to be married to Tommen instead of Joffrey, which is pedophilia. So yay, pedophilia. Sansa isn't getting on well with Robert Arryn because he ruins her snow castle. Sansa likes playing in the snow because it reminds her of the fun times she had with Arya and Bran when they were little, before the shit started. So Littlefinger helps her with the Winterfell snow castle, and that foreshadows him helping her be a better politician in Book 4. But Littlefinger's being a pervert and kissing Sansa, because that even though Littlefinger views Sansa as the daughter he and Catelyn never had, he also views her as Catelyn, so he wants to burn her, which is so creepy and weird and pedophilic. But it reminds me of when Jorah kisses Daenerys, so I guess that's some parallelisms. So Littlefinger is to marry Lysa Arryn, but she thinks he's in love with Sansa, so she gets mad at him, and he pisses her out the moon door. Not before we find out that it was her who killed Jon Arryn, and we and Littlefinger has like this awesome line where he's like, "I've always loved one woman," and she's like, "Me?" And he's like, "No, your sister." Push. Great scene. So lastly, I'm going to talk about the epilogue. So this was the first book that had an epilogue. It's very short, but very important, and it's one of my favorite storylines of these books, which were unfortunately cut from the TV show for some reason. Jenny of Oldstones is sung. In the final season, it's sung by Florence and the Machine, which I think is one of the only good parts of season 8, was that song. Jenny Oldstone is mentioned many times throughout the book. First, Arya hears it when talking to a prophet woman. Rob recalls the song while at Oldstones early in the books, and Tom sings about Jenny while waiting for Merritt Frey to arrive at the Oldstones. Through Merritt Frey's point of view, we get to see more of the Frey's personalities and relationships to each other. There's a bunch of assholes in the Frey family, of course, and Merritt's the weakest of these assholes. He failed at getting the Great John too drunk during the Red Wedding, since the Great John was able to kill several people before they got him in chains. And we find out that Catelyn's back, but she can't speak, and she's horribly disfigured. She and her followers kill Merritt because he had a hand to play in Rob's death, so we find out that she's out for revenge, willing to kill all of the Lannisters and all of the Freys. Lady Catelyn's back, and now she's Lady Stoneheart. So yeah, those are my thoughts on A Storm of Swords, Book 3, and A Song of Ice and Fire. This is a long video, almost a half an hour at this point. But, this book's 1,128 pages, so if I'd make any video this long, it might as well be this. So, like I said, it was my favorite book in the series, because there's many plot twists, surprising character deaths, and character development. Nobody ends the book the same person as they were in the beginning, which is something I like about each book. So yeah, I'm going to give this an A minus. The only reason it's not an A is because of Samuel and Bran, who I just hate. So I'm planning on reading A Feast for Crows in December and January, so I'll probably post my review around January, late January, early February. So stay tuned for that, as well as my other videos on this channel. I hope everybody out there has a nice day and stay safe and peace.